Okay. Peace, y'all. I just had some technical difficulties real quick, but I wait for those of you to get in here before I start. The chat is open as well. So if you have any questions as I go over the topics that I'm going to be discussing tonight, just make sure you use the chat. Peace, Ahmad. So tonight I'm going to be talking about podcasting, blogging, using the different technologies that we have right now, and just giving you some insight in terms of my background, my experience with this. Okay, so I see a few of you in. So what really inspired me to do this presentation tonight is, for some time I've been writing on this subject in terms of the exponential growth of technology and striving to stay at the forefront of that exponential growth and maximizing the opportunities that this exponential growth creates for those of us who are striving to utilize this digital space or this digital domain, not only as a means of creating residual income, but also as a platform to help amplify our voice. To give you a little background about myself, over 15 years ago, when I entered this digital domain or this digital space, this is way back in previously before the MySpace days, I was a writer. I wrote articles. Peace, John. Peace, Carmen. I wrote articles for different publications. I was already writing articles for in-print publications. But once the internet began to develop, I also began to access digital spaces where I was able to successfully publish articles dealing with social commentary for different publications. I used to write for a publication out of the UK called Black 7. I've written for the 5% of newspaper. I've written for various different local, regional, national, and international publications. Now, keep in mind, this is when the internet first started to develop, and I was at the forefront of what people nowadays call being an influencer. And I was doing it from the perspective of the written word. When it comes to these type of video interface that we have accessible today, the live streaming functions, that didn't exist during that time. So I was writing articles. Once social media apps began to develop, I began to also engage those apps and also amplify my voice as a writer. I'm a creative artist, so I also make music in terms of hip hop as well as poetry. So I also begin to utilize those social media platforms for that purpose. So I'm going way back to the early 2000s, 1998, 1999. In time, with technology, we begin to see the development of other different social media apps like Facebook and Twitter. And you see other ones such as Instagram and LinkedIn and Twitch, Snapchat, all of these various different Pinterest, all of these other different social media apps. And one thing that I also started to do is I created my own space. This is when blogging started to become a buzzword in the digital space or the digital domain. So this goes back to about 2005, 15 years ago. I started a blog, atlantischool.blogspot.com. When I started that blog, I had already made up in my mind and I had a mission statement in terms of why I wanted to utilize that space digitally in order to amplify my voice. I wasn't necessarily focused on the monetization or looking at that as a stream of residual income. I was just simply looking at it as a space in terms of digital real estate to help amplify my voice and to create a readership that was already connected to me with various different articles that I was writing for different publications, offline as well as online. So I did that 2005. And when I made that decision, I also made the decision that regardless of what I was doing in terms of projects, programs, and initiatives locally, regionally, or nationally, that I was going to be consistent about writing articles for this digital space that I created. And assessing my time, I made sure that I was able to write 2 articles a month, and that would allow me to remain consistent with developing my readership. And that's very, very important, very important. And that's one thing that a lot of times people don't consider when they want to start writing articles or they want to start doing podcasts or vlogs, video content. A lot of times people look at it as a sprint and don't realize that this is something that you really have to be fully invested in, because even though you may have instances where people go viral, it's easy to go viral, especially nowadays with the things that you see that's getting attention on social media. It's usually the most dramatic, the most despicable, or straight up debauchery that gets the most attention. And it's easy to just put something like that out. So to get the attention is not very difficult. Being able to sustain yourself and to maintain your audience is where the challenge is. So a lot of times when people go into these digital spaces, they don't think about it being a long-term thing. So that's one of the first key points that I wanted to emphasize to all of you who are considering or who actually have put themselves in a position where they are utilizing their platform to put out videos, or they may be writing articles, or they may be sharing other different types of content. It's all about sustainability and utilizing that level of consistency in order to build your viewership or your readership. And it doesn't happen overnight. So before you even go into this, it's important to consider and to see yourself doing this minimally for 2 years. So in other words, if you wanted to start writing articles, or you wanted to start utilizing your platform to do videos or to do podcasts or anything like that, view yourself doing it for a minimum of 2 years straight. If you can't visualize yourself doing this consistently for 2 years, then I would not encourage you to go into doing vlogs or going into writing articles or anything like that, because it takes time to develop your readership. It takes time for you to develop your viewership. Like I mentioned, I've been writing articles in my own digital domain, my own niche website since 2005. Some of you who are on here watching this video right now may have never gone to that space and realized that I've been writing articles. I have well over 325 articles that I've written consistently twice a month since that time. And some of you may be hearing about this for the first time. And that's 15 years ago that I've been doing this. So think about going into this with a mindset of not even consistently being able to do this for 2 years. Some people may just find out about you doing this 2 years from now. So think about if you don't have the wherewithal or the resilience or the consistency and the discipline to want to be invested in creating a digital space like this just for 2 years. So it's important to be able to have that vision and to consider that if you're going to go into this, you have to make sure that minimally that you're invested in this at least 2 years. Minimally. And that's being nice. The reason why I give you 2 years as a model or a standard is because the same thing applies to a person that's going into business for the first time. If you've heard people talk about entrepreneurship and business, a lot of times people who invest in business, they don't get a return on that business unless, they're involved in street pharmaceuticals. You don't see a return on that business investment just in 6 months or a year. Minimally 2 to 3 years, you really start to see a return on that business or that investment, if it's a good idea to begin with. So if a person's going into something, I've seen people in my own city set up restaurants based upon the idea that their family said that they make good sweet potato pies, or their curry chicken is good. That's not enough as an intention to actually go into business. You have to do research. You have to consider your target demographic or your market. You have to consider what is the household income or the household composition of people that will represent the critical mass of that target demographic that you're going to be promoting your business to. It wouldn't be smart or wise to set up a high-end restaurant in a community where you find out that it's 30% below the poverty rate. And a lot of the community members who live in that community receive some form of public assistance. They're typically not going to be the target demographic or the critical mass that's going to be supporting your business, no matter how good of a sweet potato pie or curry chicken that you make, right? So you have to do research and invest finances in doing that research, right? It may cost you to do and get content or research on certain target demographics before you actually start your business. So those are things you have to actually consider before you even put yourself in a position, right? As a writer, I've also done journalistic work. So I've covered different celebrities and artists. I'm gone to different shows or events or programs, and I've interviewed various different people. One time, I was covering a Fabulous concert in Toronto. For those of you who don't know, I reside in Atlantis, which I named after Niagara Falls, New York. So I live in a border town. This city is literally on the border to Canada. So Toronto, which is one of the most cosmopolitan cities in the entire world, is about an hour from where I am. So I've spent a lot of time and invested a lot of time in Canada, particularly in Toronto and Hamilton and other different areas, Burlington, over in those spaces. And I've gone to a lot of concerts out there. I've done some journalistic work. And for the Fabulous concert, I went out there and I had an opportunity to interview Dej Loaf because she was performing with Fabulous. Now, Dej Loaf at the time was in her early 20s. She might have been 21 at the most. And she got her big break from Drake. Drake on Instagram actually quoted some of her lyrics. And prior to that, she was more of a local semi-regional artist, more underground. She wasn't mainstream in that market at all. Drake got access to her music, and just by a cosign or a quote from Drake, she got over 125,000 followers instantly. from him quoting her lyrics in one of her songs. So now, all of that attention that she instantly got also opened the door for her in terms of a lot of opportunities musically. The beautiful thing about Dej Loaf is that she was already invested in her craft. She had already had out a couple of mixtapes and was already doing shows and doing a lot of other stuff before Drake noticed her or even co-signed her. So when those opportunities started to come to her, she was ready. She didn't have to get ready. She was already prepared. When somebody reached out to her for a verse on this or that, she was ready to go right into the studio. She didn't have no excuses. So a lot of times people don't realize that the idea of a 6-degree separation may exist in real time, but in a digital space or a digital domain, with the exponential growth of technology, it has essentially shrunk that 6 degree of separation to maybe 3 degrees of separation, where it's easy to get connected and to get accessibility to various different people that may work within your industry or your domain. Which also means you always have to be ready for opportunities that are going to present themselves to you. You always have to be ready. Always. Because the time functions in a different frequency in a digital domain as opposed to in real time. So you always have to be ready. She was ready. And as if you've been paying attention to her career, she's maintained a level of sustainability. She's maintained a level of relevance, because when it's like playing hot potato, when it came to her, she was ready to pass it. But a lot of people don't consider that. A lot of people just consider getting there, not what it means to stay there and to maintain that space or that position, right? So before I even got involved in the internet and writing articles, I already put thought into that. I had a vision, I had a mission statement to inspire, to empower, and to educate. I say it all of the time. That's a part of my personal mission statement. You know, turn that fire alarm off. I don't know what you're talking about. But so when I started my blog, I started writing my articles back in 2005. Before I published my first article, and I want you to listen to me clear. Before I published my first article, I had up to 9 months of articles archived already, dealing with various different topics or social commentary, already prepared to be published. Yup, stay ready so you don't have to get ready. Yup. So let me repeat what I just said. Before I published my first article, I already had up to 9 months of archived articles waiting to be published before I published my first one. Why was that important? It's because it bought me time, right? In addition to me writing articles, I've always been invested in creating projects, programs, and initiatives locally as well as regionally and nationally. So I knew that I had to buy time. I had to create my own time, because I would never know if a speaking engagement may come up, or I may be invested in a certain project, program, or initiative. And I knew that if I didn't properly assess my time and my energy, as well as my finances, that it might put me in a position where if I bit off more than I can chew, I wouldn't be able to maintain that level of sustainability and consistency with what I wanted to start doing. In other words, because I honestly assessed my time, what worked for me and has worked for me for well over a decade is I can dedicate enough time to publish 2 articles consistently a month. with all of the other things that you see me doing that I share and I post or I may talk about occasionally, I knew that in the midst of all of that, I would consistently be able to publish at least 2 articles a month. And because I honestly assessed my time in that way, I've been able to consistently do that since 2005. Consistently. Right? Now, the mistake that some people make is they may have a great idea. Somebody may tell them, hey, you got a good radio voice, or you should start this, you should start that. And they just run out there and just do it and say, you know what? I'm going to write 2 articles a week. They got 3 children. One is a teenager that goes to this school. The other one's in middle school, and this one's in elementary school. They're working a full-time job. They may be volunteering over here at the same time, but yet they jumped out there and said, I'm going to publish 2 articles a week. Usually that doesn't last because they didn't honestly assess their time. And because they didn't honestly assess their time and manage it appropriately, they're not going to have the capacity to do that consistently enough to develop the readership that is going to support what it is that they're doing. Again, this is not no overnight or one-time thing. This is cross country. This is not a sprint. This is a cross country race. So you have to be looking at it in the long term, not just, oh, I got a good idea and I'm about to just drop it right now. People who are in these different professions who have been doing this consistently, such as myself, we're not necessarily concerned about what talent that you may have and your ability to do something right now. We are more interested in what are you able to do a year from now. That's what we think about and consider. What are you able to do 2 years from now? What are you going to be doing? Right? You see some people and they publish a book. That's cool. I'm not necessarily interested in that. I want to know what your next book is going to be about. Right? If you're an artist and you put out music or something, that's cool. I want to hear the entire project. And I want to hear what are your ideas and your plans for the next project that you're already working on. That is evidence of sustainability. That is evidence of consistency. And if a person doesn't have that mindset or commitment to sustainability or consistency in whatever it is, then they're not going to last. It's only going to be a matter of time before they burn themselves out. So before I started doing any of this, I had to make an honest assessment with my time and to look at it and envision myself doing this years from now. And I'm doing it years from now because I envisioned that in the beginning. I had a sense of purpose of why I wanted to be involved in this, right? So that's the first thing to keep in mind. Make an honest assessment about your commitment to even doing this. And your time. If you wanted to use your platform to start speaking on certain topics or issues, how consistent are you going to be doing that? You're going to do it once a week? And if you do it once a week, what time and for how much time are you going to do it? All of those things are important to consider. Now, if you're going to do it once a week, how many pieces of content does that represent? All you got to do is break down how many weeks are in a year. So you're going to have at least 50 minimally pieces of content that you have to consider putting out. I'm in the burnout phase now because of not honestly assessing my money, not so much my time. What would you suggest to get out of that burnout mode? You have to first honestly assess, like you're doing right now, honestly assess, or like some people in terms of money, they budget, they create a budget. You look at how much you have a month and you look at what your expenses are, and you just simply budget it out. You can use an Excel spreadsheet for that. But even if you budget it out, you got to have discipline and be consistent about it. And again, it's not just going to happen overnight, or it's not just going to happen over a month time. You're going to start seeing the impact of budgeting appropriately and being consistent and disciplined about it over time. Over time. So one of the other things to keep in mind is right now, 2020, content is the king and queen. Content is the king or queen. You see the transition with production companies going to a lot of these streaming networks, not just going to like IMAX theaters and other different type of theaters that you can go to watch their films. A lot of these films are going directly to streaming services, and there's a competition that's going on now with Hulu and Disney and Netflix and all of these other streaming services. So they're looking for content. Look at the various different people who broke that glass ceiling of utilizing a digital space or a digital domain into transitioning into some of these streaming networks. Look at Issa Rae, who started off on YouTube with her chronicles of an awkward Black girl. And she was just doing her YouTube shows, and how that transitioned into her Insecure series that she has. You see other people who were just doing sketches and stuff as comedians using IG and Facebook, and how they transitioned into having roles in movies or being able to do stand-up shows in different places off of IG and Facebook or YouTube. So these streaming services, these providers are constantly looking for content, constantly looking for content. And when you look at the scrolling function that is built into our social media apps, the scrolling function is designed to comb for content. You're scrolling, you're combing for content. And with that exponential growth of technology, the attention span of people is actually rewiring us on a cognitive level. What do I mean by that? Think back a decade ago, over 10 years ago, and you see a news story that's breaking news. Those news stories, that content, usually had about I say about 96 hours to live. People would be talking about that news story for about 4 days. If you go back about a decade ago, that was the shelf life, or that was how long breaking news stories last. About 4 days. And then after 4 days, you started to see other breaking news stories or other content being shared that got people's attention. That was over a decade ago. Now, with the growth and the expansion of the internet and the development of social media, the scrolling functions and the live platforms that have been created with the various different apps, the shelf life of those news stories has essentially shrank from 96 hours to about 48 hours. In other words, nowadays, you see a news story that's breaking news, that story may last or trend for maybe 48 hours. Maybe. Which means the attention span of people is orientated to just 48 hours. before they're looking for something else that's new. The same thing has happened in the music industry. Over a decade ago, the standard song had 3 verses. Listen to songs nowadays, especially in hip hop, and think about a song that you know recently that actually has 3 verses to it. You will rarely find a song, especially in mainstream media, that has 3 verses to it. Some songs may have 1 verse and a repetitive hook. So it shows you the attention span and how the cognitive aspect of who we are has been rewired to be aligned with the growth and development of technology. Even with articles that you see nowadays that you may scan online, right usually at the top of that article, it may tell you the amount of reading time you have to dedicate to actually engage in that content. It may say 2 minutes reading time. So all of this is not only reshaping us on a cognitive level, but in terms of utilizing this digital space and creating a digital footprint has changed since I became involved with becoming an influencer and being a writer and publishing books and doing videos. And now I'm doing a lot of animation online. Things have changed a lot since that time. Right? So nowadays, podcasting has become the wave. A lot of people want to podcast now. A lot of people want to use these live functions as a platform to be able to share their ideas and their voice, which also means that it's become saturated. It's become overwhelmed with a lot of people who are not necessarily intentional about utilizing these digital domains or these spaces, nor have they done the research or put the time in to be sustainable and consistent about utilizing these platforms. Think about some people that you know that may have started out doing videos, or they might have been started out doing articles or other different things, and it's real spotty or inconsistent about the way that they do things now. And they may have had something real good going on. A lot of times they didn't put enough time into crafting their vision and their sense of purpose of why they wanted to utilize this. Think about a lot of the women that you see that are on IG and they fashion themselves as IG models. They're not necessarily actual models who are in print or in digital spaces or doing other different things. They're just taking pictures on IG, right? Schools are not even teaching cursive writing anymore, bro. Everyone has basically a Lipton in their pocket. Technology is moving fast. Yep. So I teach 6th grade. So a lot of my 6th grade students, sometimes they can't even read their own handwriting. It's that bad. And that's not even in cursive. That's just regular print. So with that exponential growth of technology, other things are lagging behind. Things are lagging behind in terms of the social emotional component. A lot of people just don't know how to socialize or interact with people anymore. It's very, very difficult for some people. They're disabled in terms of the social emotional thing, but they can respond with comments to postings, or they can post things on IG, or they can take pictures. But in terms of just sitting down, having a conversation, a lot of people may not be equipped to do that. Also, with the growth and development of technology, in terms of laws may not be aligned or up to the development of technology. Oh, artificial intelligence is already being utilized a lot. So yeah, so you see legal issues that may be archaic compared to the growth and development of technology. So what do I mean by that? There was a case in Michigan where there was a Facebook group of underage youth who were sharing nudes with each other on the Facebook group, a private Facebook group. Pardon me, a secret Facebook group. Because they're underage, that's child pornography. And there were thousands of students involved in this. That's the distribution of child pornography. One student took all of those images and downloaded them to a space and was sharing them. Now, the students that I'm telling you about were primarily within a certain school. Took that information, the student, and started to share it outside of that school. So now you had middle school children who had access to this as well. This is a child pornography ring on a middle school and high school level. How do you handle that legally? So the technology allowed these children to have access to doing something like this. But in terms of dealing with this issue from a legal context, there was never an experience or any point of reference of how to even handle that situation. Right? So even in a legal sense, the growth and development of technology is moving at such a fast rate that laws a lot of times have not been able to catch up with what people are able to do technologically speaking. Right? So going back to what I was saying initially about having a sense of vision and purpose before we utilize these spaces, because people are now being hardwired cognitively to operate according to a shorter attention span, you also have to consider the fact that the content that you want to put out has to be aligned with the attention span of your target demographic. So for example, right now we're going on 38 minutes of me just sitting here talking. Most of the people that are going to watch this video, they're not going to sit here and watch no 38 minutes of what I'm saying. If I really wanted to utilize the analytics that I have based upon the videos and stuff that I share, I would be making videos maybe 2 minutes or more. Because again, that is particularly the attention span of people. If you notice the Atlantis School for Gifted Youngsters animation series that I've created, they're short. It's a lot of content. It's a lot of knowledge and information, but they're short. That is to maximize the target demographic and to align with the exponential growth of technology and how people are being hardwired cognitively to operate according to that shorter attention span. Another thing, you notice that I don't really do videos like this as much anymore. It doesn't mean that I don't have anything to say. It's just I realized the change in the technology and how these spaces have started to become overwhelmed and saturated with everybody that has something to say. I've always strived to set myself apart and to be a forerunner and a pioneer with the various different things that I do. And that's one of the reasons why I focus more primarily on the Atlantis School for Gifted Youngsters animation series, because no one's doing that. No one's doing that. And mark my words, eventually you're going to start to see people want to get involved in doing that as well. Right? So again, Before you get involved in striving to create a digital footprint and operate within this type of digital space, whether you're writing articles, whether you're doing vlogs or videos, whether you are doing a podcast, you have to be clear on the amount of time that you're willing and able to dedicate to it and how consistent you're going to be with that, because over time is where you begin to create your readership and your viewership. It doesn't just happen instantly overnight. You can come out right now and do a viral video and get 5 million people sharing it and viewing it or whatever. That's fine. What are you going to put out 48 hours from now? What are you going to put out next month? You got people's attention. Now, what are you going to do about it? So it's not about you getting there. It's about you being able to maintain that space. That's what it's about. Maintenance, sustainability. So now if you've put thought into this and you've looked at your commitment and you are clear about, you know what, I know that I'll be able to do a podcast and put out an episode once a week for 2 years straight. If you're clear on that, the next step, if you're clear on that as a writer and say, you know what, I can write an article once every 2 weeks for 2 years straight. Before you put out that first podcast episode, before you put out that first article, you should have up to 9 months of content already archived before you even publish that first podcast show or that first article. Because by creating that content as an archive, you put yourself ahead of time. You don't know what extenuating circumstances or inclement weather could come up that may take you away from, oh man, I was going to put this time into writing this article or doing this podcast episode, but I'm not able to do it. Now you're putting yourself under unnecessary pressure. Now you're working for that idea instead of the idea working for you. So in order for you to be ahead of time, you need to create content as an archive. And the more information and content that you can archive, the better off you can be. A month from now, you may have an extenuating circumstance or whatever, and you might not be able to do a podcast show, but you have one archive that you can publish. Done. You may not be able to get to the library or to do some research on an article at that time. You have one archived, publish that. So you can always stay ahead of time. Always stay ahead of time. I've written 19 books, right? If I share that I'm about to publish a book, I'm already either done with my next book or I'm almost done with my next book. If I publish an article, I already have articles archived. If I'm sharing a video like this, I already have, well, not this because this is a live video. If I share a video that you see, I already have notes or things that I'm writing about that I may have archived in terms of another video that I can share. Check YouTube for sloggers. Tailor-made flip-flop. I don't know. So you have to stay ahead of time. You have to stay ahead of time. And that's the way that you do it. You archive some podcast episodes, some articles before you even publish it. And that's one of the secrets. Some people wonder, like, damn, how are you able? I know you teach school, you write books, you are a project coordinator for a mural project in your city. You write articles, you do animation, do music, you do projects, programs, and this. How are you able to do all of that all the time? And that's because I always dedicate a certain amount of time to creating content that I can archive and use at will. So before you publish that episode, before you publish that article, make sure you have content archived already so that you can buy time. and put yourself in a position where you're not under unnecessary pressure to maintain. Because again, it's all about consistency. It's all about maintenance in order for you to develop your readership as well as your viewership. So in terms of atlanticschool.blogspot.com, my peak viewership is over 100,000 people per month. And that's excellent for a niche blog because all I do is write articles there. Right? So now you've made an honest assessment about your time and you've come up with an idea of something that you want to do. You've put time into creating an archive of content. The next focus is branding. Your branding has to be consistent. So just for the sake of conversation, can't you just speed up the process by hiring someone to do months worth of content for you with your direction, obviously, but so it's not all on you? Yes, Ahmad, you can definitely outsource. You can definitely outsource. But again, hirers definitely have to align with people who also share that vision. That's the first thing that I talked about, vision and purpose. They have to be aligned with that vision and purpose. And you can outsource that and have different people do different things and maintain the continuity and the consistency of what that vision and purpose is. So definitely, yes. People do that all the time. In fact, that's one of the problems too with some people, because they may have an idea and they hire people in to create the content. But because that person that's creating the content is working for somebody, they're hired, they may not necessarily be getting justice or the best possible outcome of what they're actually doing. It's just like a person that may be a musician or a hip hop artist and they sign a contract with a record company and they're getting pennies off of their song streaming or an album. They may not even own their masters. So you have to be careful about that as well. So going back to what I said about branding, your branding has to be consistent. Meaning it's good to study SEOs or study search engine optimization, as well as keywords that are used in order to help amplify your digital footprint or your digital space. Because you may have a platform, but your voice may get lost or drowned out from all of the other saturated content out there because you don't have an effective marketing strategy or plan in terms of branding yourself. So you look at my shirt right here, my Atlantis School for Gifted Youngsters. This is a part of my brand in terms of it actually being trademarked. I also have Atlantis Build as a hashtag that I've been using for years, which helps amplify my digital footprint, my digital space. So in combination with other hashtags, it links it in terms of search engine optimization. So say there is a popular trending topic on Twitter, along with the trending topic hashtag, which means people who are checking out that hashtag, they may come across my content because it's connected to it in terms of search engine optimization. So branding is an important part of that, making sure you're very clear and consistent about what your vision and purpose is and having a unique hashtag, because again, you're utilizing that to amplify your digital space. And again, this doesn't happen overnight. It happens over time. He's giving you free game, y'all. Pay attention. Oh yeah, they. So what I was talking about initially is just the articles that I was writing. Once I started writing articles back in 2005, I transitioned into doing podcasting. It wasn't called podcasting back during that time. That's a popular word that people are using now and riding that wave today. Back then, it wasn't called podcasting. right? So I was utilizing an app called Gabcast, and that was before there was Blog Talk Radio. It was before any of these platforms that you see today. And I was doing radio shows, me and one of my brothers. And I was utilizing that strategy. The same thing. Before I would publish episode, I would have one's archived because I wanted to maintain a level of consistency and continuity with building that audience, that listening audience. Right? So when I started to do that, eventually I started to see that wave coming where people wanted to start doing podcasting now. And this is years later. Like today, people wanted to do podcasting. But because I was doing it early on, I was a pioneer in a sense where I was able to create a digital space for myself where now people who are interested in being involved in that, they may reference me as a forerunner or a pioneer or an influencer early on when it comes to operating within these digital spaces, whether that's as a writer or blogger or a vlogger. The same thing began to happen with these YouTube videos. Before anybody was doing YouTube videos, particularly talking about 5% culture, I was the first one that began doing that. Now you have various different people who are utilizing this platform and other different platforms, IG, Facebook, or whatever, who have eventually caught on to utilizing these spaces as a platform for their voice. But no one was doing that when I first started doing it. And that's why you can go back and look at like early videos that I was putting out, talking particularly about 5% culture, as well as other different type of social commentary, to the extent of, I think it's well over 700 something videos. And I started doing it because, again, I wanted to utilize this platform to help amplify my voice and align it with my vision and my purpose. So I started off writing. Then from there, I was doing vlogs, doing videos, and I was also doing what today would be called podcasting. And it was through that I started to get opportunities to work with celebrities as a consultant, and then also opportunities to be consultants and work with various different shows that you see on television. Namely, I worked as a program consultant for the History Channel show, the series Gangland. And it was through contacting me through this digital space that they recognized that I was a subject matter expert in various different things that I talked about and that I wrote about. And that's someone that they looked at as an expert in that field. So again, this was way before you started to see all of the things that you see nowadays. But again, I wouldn't have been able to do that if I was not consistent, because there were other people, once I started doing videos and blogs or writing articles, they might have started to do things like that sometime after or around the same time as me, but you don't even see them now. They're not even around anymore. They may have transitioned into doing other different things. But the reason why, when Jay-Z wore the universal flag necklace to that Brooklyn Nets game with Beyonce back in 2014, the reason that the international press contacted me about that is because of the years that I invested in creating a digital space as a writer, as a vlogger, in terms of doing videos, as well as my podcast episodes that I was doing, and I still do. So I became someone that was accessible in that type of way. Some people who are striving to start creating that digital space right now, that's who I'm speaking to in particular, in terms of some of the things you have to keep in mind in terms of why you're utilizing this digital space, why you want to have a voice, especially during this time and how you can utilize that not only to create residual income, but also to amplify your digital footprint. And if you have children, especially, to create a legacy doing this. So I had an opportunity to be featured in the IMAX film um, about Wild America, about different journeys um, in America and spaces in America. That came out sometime early this year. It came out to IMAX theaters. The producers were able to get in touch with me through my digital space. That's how they learned about me and the things that I do. The same thing with the Enslaved docuseries that just shared its finale episode, episode 6, on the Epics Network on Monday. But now it's being broadcast in Canada, BBC in the UK, and other different countries. The producers were able to get in contact with me through what they see me doing in this digital space as well. But again, it's taken time to develop that. The peak readership for my blog, Atlantis School, that has over 100,000 people that come through there to check out my articles. That didn't happen overnight. It happened because of consistency. It's the exact same thing with different series that you see on television or sports games that some of you may be into, whether it's hockey or baseball or football or basketball or whatever. COVID-19 has disrupted some things, but in terms of just normalcy or the level of consistency with you knowing that this episode is going to be coming on at this time on this day, you can develop a level of expectancy. And that is how you develop viewership. If you read certain newspapers or magazines, you know that a certain magazine is going to be out every month, a certain time. That's how that magazine develops readership, with that level of consistency. So you cannot go into utilizing platforms like this or writing or doing anything like that if you're not going to have a level of consistency, right? So those are just a few things that I wanted to just build on tonight in terms of being successful in your undertakings when it comes to utilizing these digital spaces. My email, I'm about to put it in the, let me see. I'm about to put my email in the chat. Just in case anybody wants to reach out to me for any other questions regarding how you can become more successful in what it is that you're doing. And I can help walk you every step of the way. Again, this is also how I was able to have opportunities to consult different celebrities in terms of helping prepare them for speaking engagements or how to handle the press or panel discussions. You know, it's crazy, you know, because I'm a writer, I'm an educator, and for people to recognize the time and the effort that I put into that, it has been something that I've never expected, or thankfully I was prepared for, right? This is good knowledge, God. Good looking on bringing wisdom to the cipher. No doubt, G. That's what it's all about, right? Reciprocity. So another thing that I just wanted to mention briefly is I talked about how the apps that we use today, the scrolling function, is utilized to encourage people to comb for content. It has hardwired us with a certain type of attention span. That's the reason why if you're going through Facebook and you see somebody that got a status that's this long, hold on, let me see. That's this long, you just go right past it. You might read a little bit of it, but you don't even like read the whole thing. That's because according to the app designers, the standard character count for posts on Facebook is about 60 characters. I'm not saying 60 words, I'm saying 60 letters, including periods and spaces. Those 60 characters coincides with the scrolling function of Facebook. The same thing with Twitter. You got 85 characters. With IG, you have 144 characters. And those are the standards that the software or the app designers used in order to coincide with the scrolling function of those apps. So if you're on Facebook and you're just ignoring the standard 60 character count of what you should be posting as statuses in order to maximize the attention from the people that you're connected with, if you're striving to operate a business or you're striving to publish articles or to do other different things, you're not going to get the type of attention and engagement that you should be getting because you are ignoring that this app was designed to utilize only 60 characters in terms of the postings as statuses. So one of the things that I've told people before is if you're posting articles and you want to post them on Facebook, don't post the entire article on Facebook. Post maybe a quote or maybe a couple sentences at the most with a link to the article, because people are most likely going to see that because of the character count that you're using. If you're writing a dissertation or an entire essay and expect people to read that, I mean, some people might, but most people will not, because the app itself is not designed for you to do that. It's the exact same thing with Twitter. It's the exact same thing with IG. So these are just some of the things to keep in mind. If you're going to utilize these apps or these platforms for a voice, consistency, what do you have to say? If you're going to be putting content out, if you're going to do it once a week, then are you able to put out 52 pieces of content consistently for a year? Are you able to do that without hesitation? If you're a writer, are you able to write, and you saying you're going to put out an article every week? Are you able to do that for a whole year straight without fail? Because it may be in a year that you start getting the attention and developing the readership that you would like to see with your content. It may take a year of that consistency to do that. So one of the other things that over time that I begin to have as opportunities is, like I mentioned, I initially began to write for a publication out of the UK, other publications here nationally. And over time, I began to get opportunities to submit articles for different publications, and they pay me to do it, usually like 25 cents per word. And they would give me a standard word count. So they may say, you know, It can't be no longer, your article can't be no longer than 325 words. So obviously I'll write as close to 320. They're paying me to do it. I'll write as close as to 200 and 325 words as possible because they're paying me 25 cents per word. So that may be a little over $80 for one article, right? That article may take me, depending upon the subject matter, if it's something that I'm already well versed in, it may take me in its entirety with writing it, editing the article, all this other stuff. It may take me an hour. And if they're paying me about $80, that's $80 an hour for me to just write an article. If they say your article has to be no more than 500 words, I'm going to write as close as to 500 words as possible. And if they're paying me 25 cents a word, that's over $100. Right? So if that takes me an hour to write an article, that's about $100 an hour. At the same time, I put in more hours of research and just my life experience to have the capacity to be in a position to even write that article in an hour. Right? So it's all about vision and purpose and the commitment to fulfill that vision and purpose and to brand that vision and purpose in terms of you being the maker and the owner of that vision and purpose. Like, I think, who was that mentioned that? Somebody talked about you being able to connect with people who are able to assist you. Again, you have to make sure that these are people who share your vision and your purpose. Because you end up putting somebody in a position and they don't share your vision and purpose and they drop the ball because they're not invested in the outcome, that all falls on you. And if you had something going that was consistent, you were putting out content once a week in terms of a podcast show with new music that you share on the show or whatever, and this person that you had involved in it drops the ball, now you're not able to put out a show the next week. Now it really gets nasty because you're scrambling to figure something else out and you can't put out a show another week after that. It's difficult to develop a listening audience. Or even if you're talking about writing and articles, it's difficult to develop readership. Or if you're doing videos, it's difficult to develop viewership if you're not consistent. If you're not consistent. So like I said, if a person comes to me and they're talking about different things that they are doing or they want to do, I'm not necessarily that interested in the idea or what it is that you're trying to do or what it is that you did. I want to know what you're doing. If you wrote an article, that doesn't mean that you're a writer. You wrote an article. You see many people who have published a book. And a lot of times when you see it, that person didn't even really write the book. They were just the face on the book and they had other people who contributed to it. They really just harvest the literature of other writers and compiled it into a book and put their face or their name on it. But they're not a writer. There's no other books that they're putting out. You know? So we're a little over the hour mark. I just wanted to come on for a minute and share some of my experience and advice for those of you who are striving to utilize this digital space nowadays in terms of writing or vlogging, creating videos, and doing a podcast. Number one, You have to have a vision and a purpose. And that vision and purpose is something that you should see yourself doing minimally for 2 years. If you don't see yourself doing it minimally for 2 years, then I would not even encourage you to do it, because you're wasting your time. You have to put time and effort and consistency in order to develop a readership, a viewership, and a listening audience. You have to be able to do that. And if you're not willing and able to commit your time to it, why should anybody else commit their time to looking at it, listening to it, and reading it if you're not even here for that long haul? You can't expect people to want to be invested in something that you're not even invested in. Right? So consistency, making sure that you actually have content. And the way that you create content is you buy time. Before you publish a podcast episode, before you publish an article, before you put a video out, you need to have content archived. You need to have it archived so that in case you come to a situation and it's extenuating circumstances or some kind of inclement weather, you have content archived that you can publish at will, so that you're not under the unnecessary pressure of coming up with some content on the spot and maintaining that consistency that you need to maintain in order to develop your listening, your readership, and your viewership audience. So archive your content before you put anything out. You buy time that way. And at the same time, you won't put yourself in a position like you see a lot of people out here who are chasing ambulances. You don't want to be an ambulance chaser. Think about people who you may see on YouTube and they have fashioned themselves as some type of conspiracy theorists. Every week they got some new conspiracy to come up with to break knowledge to you about something that you don't know about that you need to be up on. Think about a person that's chasing that ambulance. They have to always come up with something, because if not, y'all won't be watching. So a lot of these people, they just be making shit up just to get your attention, or they focus on titles that can operate as the kind of clickbait just to get you to look at it. But they're chasing ambulances. Look at people who create these channels and all they do is reshare gossip. All they do is just wait for whatever gossip is out and just reshare it to get views. You don't want to put yourself in that position either. True indeed. The new pimping. If you're really secure with your content and your voice and your platform and what it is that you have to share, you're operating not only on your own frequency, but also on your own timetable, because you are setting your own pace. You're not chasing content. You're not chasing stories that you got to talk about in order for people to look at what you're doing. Because if you're doing that, your whole platform relies on other people. You're not even thinking for yourself or doing something under your own power. You got to wait for something to happen to Mariah Carey so that you can talk about it to get views. You got to wait for this traumatic event to take place so that you can talk about it. And it's not even news. Going back to what I mentioned earlier about when you look at the way that news and content was put out over a decade ago, the focus then, because you didn't have the type of apps that we have developed now and the sense of urgency or immediacy with stories being broke. Back over a decade ago, the emphasis was more on whatever that story was, whatever that content was. The emphasis was on making sure you get it right. If I'm going to put this out, I'm going to well research it and make sure that it's right. Now, that's not the emphasis or the focus. Now, it's on who's first. What's going to be the first source to timestamp this content that everybody else can refer to, because that's going to get web traffic to this space so that I can monetize it. I don't care if it's right or not. I'm just going to put it out there. That's how people operate now. So when you hear people talking about fake news and all this other stuff, yeah, you got people who aren't doing stuff like that. They don't care if it's right and exact. They just care about who's first. You don't want to be in that demographic either. Because again, you're not dictating your own pace. You are only operating to the extent of what others are actually doing. I've never done that. And that's one reason why you rarely see on my channel me talking about current events. I rarely do that because I don't allow that to dictate this space. I set my own pace and I dictate how I use this space and this platform, because I understand over time the importance of controlling the narrative. And that's what it ultimately comes down to. Controlling the narrative, because I know that this voice, this space, others are not going to share what it is that I'm sharing. Others may share things similar in their own way, but this is unique. This is my niche space, and it took me time to develop this space. From years of consistency and me being thorough with what it is that I actually do. So I put my email in the chat for those of you who want more insight into utilizing your digital space, how to monetize it, and how to be successful in your undertakings. But I gave y'all a lot to think about tonight. And like I said, because of the way that these social media platforms have started to rewire us cognitively, the attention span is much shorter nowadays with this growth and development of technology in comparison to what it was over a decade ago. So I know that most people that's watching this, they're not going to sit here for no hour and listen to what it is that I'm saying. But those who are serious about what it is that I'm sharing and they want to utilize that in terms of them developing their platforms and being more successful in their undertakings, they'll see the value in what it is that I'm sharing. Right? So indeed, a lot of people, a lot of Google brains out there. So I didn't start off with this, but I wanted to just briefly go into today's mathematics as well. So today's the 20th, and 2 and 0 is wisdom cipher, right? Do you think the attention span that's been interrupted can be reversed? Yeah, definitely. You just have to strike a balance, Joy. And when I say strike a balance, you have to make sure that you're able to unplug. Utilize technology, but don't allow technology to use you. And it requires just simple things. If I'm sitting down eating with my young queen, my baby, or my other queens, or if I'm eating with other people, I'm not sitting there on my phone. That's sacred time and sacred space. So I make sure that I put technology in the place that it needs to be in. And I don't share a whole bunch of screen time. So technology is not going anywhere. So it's unrealistic to think about like we have to unplug and all of this other stuff. You just have to plug in when it's necessary. That's all. And that's part of the reversal process. Some people consider the fact that you have some people today who are social media natives. They are social media natives. They were born into a society where social media exists, the internet exists. So they're born from the physical womb into a social media womb. They're reborn in a world where they are social media natives. Some of you who are in this chat right now, we're social media immigrants. We were here before the internet. We were here before social media, and we've had to immigrate. We're immigrants into this social media world. Some of us have successfully transitioned appropriately, being able to navigate this digital space and utilize it to our advantage. A lot of us haven't. Just like you may see a person that finds it very difficult to immigrate to a new country. Some of us have found it very difficult to immigrate into a digital domain or to this social media era. So those of us who are social media immigrants, we have an advantage in terms of knowing what this world was like prior to the internet. And we have to make sure that we use that as a standard in terms of how we assess what's going on technologically now. Some of the younger generation, they don't know about that world. So it's really up to us to help socialize them into being present, being in real time, and unplugging from the internet. There's hella people trying to kill me. Part of me understands. The other wants to give up. Somehow, for some reason, mathematics came into my life. Well, mathematics is the operating system of the universe. When knowing going about life, I mean, one important thing is being still. Being still. Putting some thought into where you are and where you want to go from that place. You know, as a people, and I'm talking about us as original people, we've always developed techniques and strategies of stillness, ways to quiet the mind and to use the mind to master the matter or master the body. Fasting is an important technique to use. Some people use prayer. Some people use meditation. Other people use yoga or other different exercises. Some use combative arts. Some people invest time in nature. There's a lot of things that we've incorporated as original people in order to sustain ourselves and to teach that mind is the master over matter. But in order to do that, it takes contemplation. Yeah. Family with any other origins of the people of Mexico. Yeah, I got people that are from Mexico. Family. You're original as well. You are part of the indigenous people. So going back to what I was saying about today's mathematics being wisdom cipher, when you look at the number 2 and 0, wisdom is discernment. Wisdom is right judgment. When you look at a cipher is 360 degrees, right? So just looking at yourself personally, one of the wisest things that you can do is to be circumspect. Is to realize that in order to see things, there are many different perspectives that you have to take into consideration. Right? Because a lot of times people may just see things from their perspective, and that's like this. And when you look at things like this, it is easy to get blindsided by life because you can't see what's in your peripheral. You have no vision. You're not paying attention to what's coming from these different directions, and you damn sure don't see what's going on behind you. Because even if somebody's in front of you, striving to explain to you what's going on behind you, if you have tunnel vision, you don't even see clearly what that person is saying in front of you. So wisdom or discernment, right discernment, is the ability to see the various different perspectives of different situations before you make a decision. Right? You build on the crafts seen recently. Can you build on the crafts seen recently and the government devils headed to the bunkers? So, wisdom cipher 20. You take it to the letter T in our alphabet. That's truth or square. So what does that have to do with wisdom cipher? A square is also 360 degrees because you have 4 90-degree angles. You have 4 right angles. So a circle is 360 degrees and a square is 360 degrees. That square has 4 different angles. So when we say truth or square, we're telling you that the truth, in order for you to see the full capacity of the truth, you have to always consider 4 angles. Yes, it's always important to consider 4 angles, which means one angle is how you see it. Another angle is how you don't see it. Another angle is how it could be that both of you don't see. And then another angle is how it could be that both of you do see. So that's being circumspect. It's taking into consideration that there's various different ways to perceive something, that the angle that you're coming from is not, it may be right because it's a 90-degree angle, which means it's a right angle. That may be a right angle, but that may not be the right situation. That may be a different situation or scenario. So when we say truth or square, a square in the building trades allows you to draw right angles. It allows you to draw right angles. So in approaching situations, some people have a mindset and they're like, yo, the truth. I'm just going to say the truth and it's going to hurt people. The truth has to be angled. You got to take the truth and angle it appropriately so that it's going to be best received by that person who's able to grasp it according to the angle that you're sharing it. Sometimes you may have the truth, but you got the wrong angle. So yeah, the truth is the truth, but decorum is important. Yeah, delivery, like you said, Joy. Yeah, delivery. That's important. So going back to what I said about wisdom cipher, when you're circumspect, when you are looking at the peripheral and all of the different possibilities and perspectives going on around you, that equips you with the tools, going back to what I said about a square being a tool in the building trades that allows you to draw right angles. It equips you with the tools to approach situations with the proper angle and deliver the truth at the same time. If you looking at things like this, then you're going to be getting blindsided by life. You're not going to see the truth. It's going to blindside you. But if you're learning and you're looking around, you're observing, you're making wise decisions based upon the different perspectives that are going on around you, that equips you with the tools to angle the truth appropriately. Truth or square. Right? At Allah's school in Mecca, do you build, say on Wisdom Cipher, all the ways you reached Wisdom Cipher? Yeah, you can build on that as well. You can build on that as well. But in all things, it doesn't matter how you build, it has to have a practical application to it. You know, a lot of times you see people talking about all kinds of stuff that's like, okay, so what does that mean right now? Like, how can I take that and apply it to my life right now? How is that practical? I would think there's less than 1 + 19 would teach, as well as 2 + 18. Yeah, because it's all mathematics. So if you look at 119, knowledge born. So knowledge born, 19th letter in the alphabet is S, that's self or savior. So that's like saying, be aware of self or savior. Knowledge born. Be aware or conscious of self or savior. Why? Because in order to save anything or anyone, a person has to put forth the effort to do it for themselves. You can give people knowledge, but you can't make them think. Right? And that's the beauty of mathematics. It doesn't necessitate your belief. It doesn't require your belief in it. It doesn't matter. If you are drawing something up wrong, you're just going to have to deal with the results of that. So when I say mathematics is the operating system of the universe, when you look at technology, you look at your laptop or your iPad, it has an operating system. Based upon the instructions that you give that operating system, it's going to perform a certain way. It's going to process those instructions a certain way. If you put in the wrong instructions, then it's going to process that or not process it. Life is the exact same way. That's why truth or square is important, because you may be well-meaning, you may be well-intended, you may have the best and the kindest heart in the world, but your delivery, like Joy was saying, may be off. Truth out of season won't grow. The way that you share something wasn't appropriate. And because of that, even though it's true, it may not be received. It may not be received. So that's just one example of how today's mathematics functions. You know, it functions a lot of different other ways too. I could have took it to different lessons and did all of that other stuff as well. But that's just a very basic and practical application of how you can utilize supreme mathematics. So now to talk about that and to coincide with what I've been sharing tonight in terms of podcasting and blogging, Well, the cipher is a circle. It's 360 degrees. So when you look at a circle, it is paradoxical because it means nothing and everything at the same time. You get that? A circle represents nothing or no thing, but also simultaneously everything at the same time. And if you grasp that, it would be easy to grasp how that symbol is used in ancient Kemetic society and in other different indigenous and classic societies. Why the cipher or the circle is used. What does it symbolize? So a cipher is a person, place, or thing, but it's also nothing at the exact same time. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, so I've been on here for about an hour and a half, so I'm about to get off now. But like I said, I put my email in the chat just in case any of you have any more questions about starting a podcast, or you wanted to start writing articles or doing some vlogging, putting videos together and sharing them on YouTube or any other spaces. This is something else that I wanted to mention. Going back to what was brought up about a cipher. We live in a cycle of life. Life is a cycle. Life is a cipher. That's one reason why the cipher is not only at the beginning of the mathematics, but it's also essentially at the end. So we say knowledge, wisdom, understanding, culture, power, quality, God, build or destroy, born, cipher. That cipher, that circle tells you that you go all the way right back to the beginning. So it's a cycle of life, right? When you look at this society, it doesn't matter how advanced technology gets. It doesn't matter how exponentially it grows. You're still not creating more soil that we need. You're still not inventing more air. The water that's here has been here. So you're not inventing any more elements, which means that this digital space, this digital domain, at any time, this can disappear. But what kind of life are you actually leading offline? That is the true investment. So as we're seeing this exponential growth of technology, the value of agriculture is actually increasing because people are becoming more disconnected from the earth, which makes the earth more of a rarity of beauty, which makes the earth of more value now because people are more invested in a digital space or a digital domain, which is not really connected to real time. One of the things that I also made sure of when I started to get involved with being online is when I share things, I wanted to make sure it was consistent and aligned with what I actually do in life. So these videos that I've posted over the years, the animation series that I started doing, the books that I've written, the articles that I've written, you wouldn't come to my city and I'm a stock boy at Walmart. And if that's what I actually do professionally, I would show that online. If that's what my profession was, you would see evidence of that online. Because, like I said, I wanted to make sure that what I do in real time is consistent with what you see in this digital space or this digital domain. Everybody doesn't have that level of integrity. You see people on here that act like they scholars and subject matter experts of this, that, and the third, and they don't even have a job. They're not even doing anything professionally to take care of themselves or their family. You see them presenting themselves online like they a baller and they doing this, that, and the third, and it's like you live with your mother. Permies, yeah, I've heard of that, but not that term of like the apprenticeship with farmers and agriculturalists. Yes. So if y'all don't got any other questions, I'm about to get off of here. True indeed. But I appreciate all of y'all tuning in. Definitely go back and watch this again if there's things that I shared and you tuned in later on that you didn't catch. And also share it with your people as well that can benefit from this insight in terms of them podcasting and blogging and blogging. Also in the description, I put a link to my Atlantis School Renovation Project. Some of you may not be aware of it, but I acquired a property in my city and I've been renovating it into an early childhood learning center and after school program that focuses on cultural enrichment for not only the youth in my community or my city, but youth who actually visit my city as well. You can go through my videos. I did a public walkthrough with the regional cable station so that you get a sense of what it is I'm actually doing and the importance of that work. Please support that and share it so that others can support it also. So I'm gonna tune out. If I come up with some other ideas or some things that I'd like to share, I may come on live again at another time. If you have any ideas of something that you think you would be able to benefit from me building about, just email me and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Y'all enjoy your night and thanks for tuning in. Peace.